I realized I needed to clean the kitchen when I opened the cabinet to grab a lunch container and couldn't find a single lid that fit. We cook wash dishes and wipe the counters every day. But why do the simplest things like grabbing a pair of scissors or closing a container still feel so frustrating? In this video, I'm going to reset my kitchen from the beginning, one area at a time in the exact order that felt easiest for me to follow. Before, I would clean everything, and a few days later, it would all be messy again. But this time, by the end of the week, everything was still in place, and I didn't feel tired every time I walked into the kitchen. If you're standing in your kitchen and not sure where or how to start, this video is for you. Now let's go through each step in the exact order I used. I started with the fridge because it's something I open every single day. And when it's messy inside, even grabbing one thing can be annoying. I opened each shelf and checked what needed to go. Leftovers that had been sitting for more than 3 days, or containers I couldn't even remember what was inside, I threw them out. Next, I took the shelves and drawers out to wipe them down. I used warm water, a little dish soap, and a clean cloth. Some of the trays I could take straight to the sink and wash. I also wiped inside the fridge, especially in the corners where I found some spilled fish sauce and old food residue. Then I moved on to the freezer. I pulled everything out and checked each bag. Anything covered in ice crystals or sitting there for months without a label, I tossed. There were a few things I almost kept, but if I haven't used them by now, I probably never will. I grouped the things I wanted to keep: meat in one section, frozen veggies in another, and fruit in a separate area. I didn't over-organize. I just made sure I could see what I had and grab it easily. Finally, I gave the freezer trays a quick wipe with a damp cloth and put everything back in place. Once it was all done, I didn't feel overwhelmed looking inside. I didn't have to move stuff around just to find what I needed. Everything was cleaner and, more importantly, easier to use. That's really the goal. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at all the items that were removed during this reset. What got tossed, what didn't come back, and why. If you've ever wondered how to decide what stays and what goes, that one might be especially helpful. But back to today's video. Now that the fridge and freezer are done, let's move on to the next area. Now I moved on to the cabinet where I keep my pots, pans, and other big kitchen items. This spot gets messy fast, especially when I'm in a rush and just toss things back in without thinking. First, I took everything out and laid it all on the floor so I could see what I actually had. Some of the pans were stacked too tightly, and a few lids were just sitting loose in the back. I also found a couple of baking trays I hadn't used in over a year. I wiped down the inside of the cabinet with a damp cloth and some mild soap. There was a bit of dust and some crumbs along the edges. Once it was clean, I started going through the items one by one. If I hadn't used something in months and didn't have a real reason to keep it, I put it in a donation box. I had 2 big soup pots, but I only ever use one, so I kept the one I like more and gave away the other. Same with lids that didn't match anything or plastic containers that had melted slightly from heat. No need to keep those around. After decluttering, I sorted what was left. I put heavier pots on the bottom and stacked pans so I could grab them without having to move 3 others. I kept lids in a bin to the side so they wouldn't roll around or get lost. I also placed the items I used the most, like my go-to frying pan and saucepan, toward the front for easy access. Once it was all back in the cabinet, felt more spacious, even though I didn't add any organizers or fancy tools. I just removed what wasn't helping and put the rest back in a way that actually made sense. Now when I open that cabinet, I don't feel like I'm playing Jenga. Everything has a place and I can grab what I need without frustration. After the big items were done, I moved on to the utensil drawer. This is where I keep things like spatulas, tongs, whisks, and small kitchen tools. Over time, this drawer had turned into a jumble of random items. Every time I reached in, I had to move something out of the way to find what I actually needed. I started by emptying the drawer completely. I placed everything on the counter so I could see what I had. I found several duplicates tools I forgot I owned and a few items that were broken or worn out. Then I wiped the inside of the drawer with a damp cloth and a little dish soap. There were crumbs and a thin layer of grease along the bottom that I had not noticed until everything was out. Once the drawer was clean, I sorted through the tools. I picked out the ones I use often and set them aside. I had more than one of several tools like peelers, garlic presses, and spatulas. I kept the ones in better shape and set the extras aside to donate or throw away if they were damaged. To keep things more organized, I used small plastic bins that I already had. I grouped similar items together. Cooking spoons went in one section, spatulas in another, and small tools like measuring spoons or zesters in a separate spot. I placed the things I reach for the most in the front so they are easy to grab. When I put everything back, it was much easier to find what I need. I no longer have to dig through the drawer or untangle things to get one item. It takes just a few extra minutes to do this, but it makes cooking feel less chaotic. I did not add anything new or buy special organizers. I just cleared out what I no longer use and gave everything a place. The next spot I tackled was the cabinet where I keep all the food containers. This is one of those areas that gets messy even when I try to keep it under control. Lids slide around, containers get stacked unevenly, and somehow there are always a few pieces that don't match. I took everything out and put it all on the counter. That included every lid, every container, even the small ones I forgot were in there. Once the cabinet was empty, I wiped it out with a damp cloth and some dish soap. There were crumbs and a little dust in the corners. Then I started matching containers with their lids. Any container that didn't have a lid, or any lid without a container, I set aside. I also got rid of anything that was stained, cracked, or had a warped lid that never stayed on right. I kept only the sets that were in good shape and that I actually use. To organize them, I stacked the containers by size. I put all the small ones together, then the medium, then the larger ones. I stored the lids vertically in a small bin so they wouldn't slide around or get lost in the back of the cabinet. If I didn't have a bin, I would have used a box or even a shallow container lid to keep them in place. I also kept only the amount I realistically use. I used to keep way too many just in case. But in reality, I rotate through the same 5 or 6 containers every week. The rest were just taking up space. Once everything was sorted and put back, the cabinet felt much easier to use. I can open it, grab what I need, and close it without having to shove things around. No more containers falling out or spending extra time looking for the right lid. This is one of those small areas that seems like a mess no matter what, but cleaning it properly makes a huge difference in how the kitchen feels overall. Next, I cleaned the area under the kitchen sink. This spot gets messy easily because things are just shoved in and forgotten. Old sponges, empty bottles, plastic bags, it adds up fast. I started by taking everything out and laying it on the floor. I found 2 broken spray bottles, a few nearly empty cleaners, and a sponge that should have been tossed a long time ago. There were also random things I didn't remember putting there. Once the space was empty, I wiped it down using a damp cloth and a little dish soap. There were sticky spots and dust in the corners. After drying it off, I looked through what I had. I threw out anything I didn't use, anything broken, and anything that had been sitting there for no reason. I kept only what I use regularly. I grouped items into small categories: dishwashing supplies, general cleaners, and extras like gloves and trash bags. I used a plastic bin to hold smaller items so they don't slide around. Taller bottles were lined up along the side where I could see and reach them easily. I placed the items I use most often in the front and the less used ones in the back. I also checked that nothing was blocking the pipes or too close to anything that might leak. Just doing that made the space feel safer and more organized. Once everything was back, it looked better and felt more useful. This isn't a spot I open every day, but when I do, it helps to know exactly where things are without having to move a pile of clutter. It only took about 15 minutes, but now it's one less place that adds stress when I'm trying to clean or cook. After finishing under the sink, I moved on to the pantry. This is where I store dry goods, snacks, and extra ingredients. It's easy for things to pile up here, especially when I buy new items without checking what I already have. I started by taking everything out shelf by shelf. I didn't empty the whole thing at once because that would have made too much of a mess. I laid items on the counter and grouped similar things together: grains, canned goods, sauces, snacks, and baking supplies. While sorting, I checked expiration dates. Anything that was expired or stale went straight into the trash. I also found a few duplicates and opened packages I forgot about. I combined what I could and threw out anything that didn't look fresh. Once each shelf was empty, I wiped it down with a clean cloth and soapy water. There were some crumbs and spills, especially near the bottom where snacks tend to fall over. Then I put everything back in a way that made more sense. I kept heavier items like rice and canned food on the lower shelves. Snacks and grab-and-go items went at eye level, so they're easy to reach. Baking supplies and things I don't use as often went on the higher shelves. I didn't use any special containers, just basic bins I already had to keep loose items from falling over. I grouped small bags together in one bin and used another to hold extra seasoning packets and sauces. Now when I open the pantry, I can see everything at a glance. I don't have to dig around or wonder if I already have something before going to the store. This step took a bit more time than the others, but it was worth it. A tidy pantry makes meal planning easier, and it helps cut down on food waste. Next, I looked at the countertop. Over time, a lot of small appliances had ended up there. Some I used often, like the coffee maker and toaster. Others just sat there collecting dust. I started by looking at what I actually used during a typical week. The rice cooker, air fryer, and blender were all sitting out, but I only used 1 or 2 of them regularly. The rest were taking up space and making the kitchen feel more crowded. I unplugged the ones I rarely use and gave each of them a quick wipe to remove dust or grease. Then I found a place to store them, either in a lower cabinet or on a shelf in the pantry. I stacked the lighter ones on top of each other to save space, and I kept the cords wrapped neatly with rubber bands so they would not tangle. On the counter, I kept only the appliances I use almost every day. For me, that was the coffee maker and toaster. Everything else went into storage. I also took a moment to wipe down the countertop after clearing it. There were a few stains under the appliances that I had not noticed before. After putting things away, the whole kitchen felt more open. I had more room to prep meals and it looked cleaner without all the extra equipment sitting out. Even though I didn't get rid of anything, just moving things off the counter made a big difference. It only took about 10 minutes, but it made the space feel calmer and easier to work in. After clearing off the counter, I turned to the upper cabinets. The one with all the mugs and cups was completely full. Some were stacked, some were squeezed in sideways, and every time I opened the door, something shifted. I took everything out of the cabinet and set it on the table. Then I sorted through what we actually use. I kept the mugs and cups we reach for every day and set aside the extras. A few were chipped or never used, so I put those in a box to donate or toss. Once I saw how many we had, I knew I needed a better way to store them. Instead of stacking them back into a crowded shelf, I decided to hang the mugs to save space. I installed a simple metal rack under the cabinet. It just slides in and hooks onto the shelf, no drilling needed. The hooks hold about 6 mugs, which is exactly how many we use often. I hung them by the handles and made sure they were secure. This freed up an entire shelf in the cabinet. I used that space to store other items that had been taking up room on the counter, like water bottles and small containers. I wiped down the inside of the cabinet before putting the rest of the cups back in. With fewer items and more breathing room, it's now easy to grab what we need without knocking anything over. Even though hanging mugs seems like a small thing, it opened up space that was packed before. It also makes the kitchen feel a bit more organized just by having one less cabinet that's stuffed full. Now when I open that cabinet, it's not a balancing act. Everything fits, and the things we use the most are right where they should be. Once the clutter was out of the way, I focused on cleaning the surfaces. This step made the whole kitchen feel fresh again. I started with the countertop. I moved anything that was still sitting out, then wiped it down with a damp cloth and a bit of dish soap. I paid extra attention to spots near the stove and sink, since those areas usually have grease or watermarks. I also wiped behind small items like the paper towel holder and the salt and pepper shakers. Next, I cleaned the cabinet doors. I noticed some smudges and fingerprints on the lower cabinets, especially near the handles. I wiped each door with a soft cloth and warm soapy water. For the handles, I gave them a good scrub, especially the ones that get touched all the time, like under the sink and near the stove. I also wiped down the backsplash. There were a few spots with oil splatter that I hadn't seen until I looked closer. A quick wipe with a damp cloth was enough to clean them off. Then I went over the edges and corners of the counters. Crumbs and dust tend to collect there, and they're easy to miss during daily cleaning. I made sure to get into those spots and wipe them thoroughly. This step didn't take much time, but it made a big difference. The kitchen looked brighter and felt cleaner just from wiping down the surfaces we touch every day. It's easy to overlook these areas, especially when we're busy, but taking a few minutes to clean them properly helped pull everything together. It was like the final touch after all the organizing. Now the kitchen not only works better, it looks and feels better too. Once everything had been sorted and put back where it belonged, I added one more step to make the setup easier to maintain. I labeled the storage areas. I didn't label everything in the kitchen, just the spots where things tend to get mixed up. That included bins in the pantry baskets under the sink, and a few drawers that hold smaller items. I've noticed that even when a space is organized, it's easy for it to fall apart again if no one remembers where things go. For labeling, I kept it simple. I used masking tape and a marker for most areas. On the pantry bins, I wrote labels like snacks grains and canned goods. Under the sink, I labeled bins for dishwashing and cleaning supplies. For drawers, I added small labels like utensils and measuring tools. The labels didn't have to look perfect. They just needed to be clear and easy to read. If I had a label maker, I would have used that, but tape and a marker worked just fine. This step made a bigger difference than I expected. With labels in place, everything was easier to keep up with. I didn't have to stop and think about where to put things back. And it helped other people in the house too. When things are clearly labeled, it's more likely they'll end up in the right spot. It also gave me a better overview of what I had. Just seeing the labels reminded me of what each space is meant for, and it kept me from overfilling or combining things that don't belong together. Once the surfaces were clean and everything had been organized, I turned to the dishes. There were a few clean ones in the drying rack and some left in the sink that I had not gotten to yet. I started by putting away the clean dishes first. I dried anything that was still damp and stacked the plates and bowls back in the cabinet. I made sure everything went back to the spot I had already organized earlier in the process. That made this part quicker since I didn't have to shift things around to make room. Then I washed the rest of the dishes in the sink. It wasn't a big pile, but it felt good to clear it out now that the kitchen was almost done. I rinsed everything, washed it with dish soap and hot water, and set it aside to dry. I wiped down the sink afterwards so it didn't stay wet or have food bits sitting around. This step helped tie everything together. It's easy to leave dishes for later, especially when we're tired or focusing on other parts of the kitchen. But once the space is clean and organized, leaving dishes out feels like hitting pause on the progress. I also checked the dishwasher if I had used it earlier and emptied it if needed. Putting everything back in its place gave the kitchen a finished look and helped keep the counters clear. Even though dishes are part of the daily routine, doing them at the end of a full kitchen reset made the whole room feel complete. It's a small task, but it really matters when you're wrapping up a full clean. The last step is setting a few small habits to keep things in order without starting from scratch every week. After putting in the effort to clean and organize everything, I wanted a way to make it last. I started with a short routine at the end of each day. After dinner, I take 5 to 10 minutes to wipe down the counter, check the sink, and put away anything that's sitting out. If there are only a few dishes left, I wash them right away, or load the dishwasher before I go to bed. That way, I don't wake up to a mess the next morning. I also started paying more attention to what gets out of place. If I notice a drawer starting to feel cluttered again, or a container that's missing a lid, I take a minute to fix it instead of letting it build up. Just a small reset here and there makes a big difference. One habit that's helped the most is being more selective about what comes into the kitchen. If I bring home a new tool or container, I make sure I either have a spot for it or I let go of something I no longer use. This helps keep drawers and cabinets from slowly filling up again. None of these habits take much time, but doing them regularly helps the kitchen stay clean without needing another big overhaul. Some days I do more, some days less, but having a simple routine keeps me from falling back into old patterns. Keeping the kitchen organized isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing just enough each day so that it still feels manageable. That way, the space stays useful, calm, and ready whenever I need it. That's it for today. We went through the entire kitchen one area at a time, and it honestly made a bigger difference than I expected. Every small step added up, and doing it in this order helped keep everything more manageable. If you're still watching, I hope this gives you a good place to start. You don't have to do it all at once. Just start with one small space. In the next video, we'll go over everything that was cleared out during this process and talk about why each item didn't make the cut. There's also a fun announcement at the end that you won't want to miss. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like it, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks so much for spending time here today. I'll see you in the next one.